Good afternoon, everyone. It's one of those sessions which we all love. It's a session where we talk about Pakistan and India-Pakistan relations. So if you're looking for a session where we can do no wrong and the other side can't do anything right, tune into television this evening. Because I think what we're going to do is we're going to try and take this in a slightly different way. I had a conversation with authors who are exemplary professionals and individuals on their own right. And we'll try and do some bit of reflection because the theme of the conversation is about India and Pakistan at 70. We are probably 3 or 4,000 kilometers away from Pakistan and Bangladesh. So we have the distance to have some kind of a perspective to look back, reflect from our own different perspectives and see uh, what are these two or three countries, if you include Bangladesh, we must include Bangladesh, which we will. Uh, these three modern nation states evolved in a particular 20th century context. There's a long history to how the countries were born, how they were created, and the paths they chose or the paths they ended up taking. So what I'll do is I'll ask each of the panelists to weigh in on a few questions on what did we do right, what did they do right, what did we do wrong, what did they do wrong. In a very large sense, we will not sort of restrict it to any particular domain and not get specialized. We'll talk about it in general. And then in the second part, we'll try and see what is it that they can learn from us and we can learn from them, right? And let's see what comes out of this reflection on a wonderful Sunday morning in Bangalore. May I just start with, I think I'll ask Ambassador Raghavan here to start because his book on the people next door really is a book about people. It's not about a nation state, it's about the people, right? So maybe from that perspective, can you just take us back to the 70 years of India and Pakistan? And let's try and spend about the first part of this trying to figure out what Pakistan did right. What did they get right? It's probably a more challenging question than to say what they got wrong.
Well, thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here in Bengaluru. I'm very, very grateful to the LitFest organizers for having invited me to be part of this very distinguished panel. When you look back on India and Pakistan and Bangladesh at 70, and if I can just briefly digress, because this is a thought which has been in my mind, we tend to think of 1947 as one partition. And possibly it was 4 or 5 partitions. Because after all, firstly, you had the partition of India into 2 states, India and Pakistan, and this affected the whole of India and the whole of Pakistan. But there was also the partition of the Punjab, which was the second partition. There was the partition of Bengal, which was the third. And if you widen your frame further, in some senses, there was a partition of the Pathans, which was the Durand line becoming the border or the so-called border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And finally, and most importantly, you had the partition of Kashmir. So all these partitions alongside another major division, which was the partition of the Muslim community of undivided India. So the complexities of 1947 are considerable, and each of these partitions, in fact, casts a shadow which continues up to this day. The second thing which struck me about what India and Pakistan, what have we done right or what has gone right, I think it's important to remember that relations between neighboring countries are always difficult. One of the most profound things ever said to me during my years in Pakistan was said by the South Korean ambassador. And he said that, Ambassador, I really envy you, your relationship with Pakistan. Your people meet, you see the same movies, people are traveling, you have the same literary culture, etc., etc. Now, if you see India and Pakistan from a North Korea, South Korea perspective, it's all right. It's not great, but it's not so bad either. Or if you look at India and Pakistan from an Israel Arab perspective, again, it's not bad. The point is that neighboring countries will have contested relationships. In India and Pakistan, a lot of the contestations are there because of the burden of history. But are there things which, and to end on a positive note, which is what you wanted to have, are there things which India and Pakistan have done together? Not too many, but some there are, and very significant ones. One, for example, was this very complex division of river waters, the Indus Waters Treaty, a treaty which has survived all the ups and downs of the India Pakistan relationship. More recently, in our own times, in 2005, this was the softening up of the border between Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan occupied Kashmir through cross LOC exchanges in terms of transportation links, trade links, and so on. So it's not as if the menu is totally negative. Yes, in the present environment, in today, things look down, but ups and downs have been an intrinsic part of the India-Pakistan cycle right from the very beginning. Thank you.
General Davar, if I might jump to you, because I think within the forge, when I talk to professional soldiers, there is always a sort of a not of I don't think the colonels and the majors today will tell you that, but the generals will certainly say that there was a time when they would look across onto the Pakistani side and look at the Pakistan army and say that here's a very professional outfit which is a competitor to us. Do you agree with that kind of a view?
You know, before I answer your question specifically, I'd like to agree with whatever the ambassador has just said here. But before that, no pontification. But I'd like to appeal to the political leadership in the country, all political parties and the future political leaders, that when it comes to matters of national security or any national interests of grave import, please do not politicize. You think you may be serving your political parties, but we have to serve the nation first. The loyalty to the nation is much more than to your political parties. Because political parties will come and go. India is eternal. So let's remember that. Now I come to your, the trajectories of India, Pakistan, and now Bangladesh also. They have been at, not only at variance, they have been at conflict with each other. And when you asked your question in your introduction, you said what's, common about us and good about us and positive and all. Unfortunately, there's more negativity in our India-Pakistan relations than any positivity. And the reason is very simple, and I'm not going to go back to the partition, the genesis of the partition, which drives a lot of animosities between the two countries. Let's look at it now, because I have also felt, and I've written this in my book also many times, that the Pakistanis have got a very myopic and a self-defeating stance, pathologically obsessive towards India. And I've been on track to dialogues, as the ambassador or Nitin said, that we meet each other very warmly, we enjoy a drink and we talk about good old things. But somewhere or the other, as far as they are concerned, it does not get translated into government policy. And for them, for Pakistan, the existence of Pakistan is 95% of their nationalism is hate India. You know, that is the unfortunate part. And as you all know, all prime ministers of India, including the current one, they have made efforts to improve matters with Pakistan, but they're the Pakistani deep state. And to those who hear some young people who do not understand what the deep state means, the deep state means the Pakistan army, their intelligence agencies, and the many terror tanzeems. They have always tried to have adversarial relations with India for their own good, not good of Pakistan, but for the good and the perpetuity of their power in Pakistan. Now I come to with these opening remarks, I'd like to come to the specific question you asked. Yes, Pakistan and us, the Indian Army, we have inherited the same values, the same professionalism from the old erstwhile British Indian Army. We were in the same, for example, I was in 7th Light Cavalry. One of our squadrons was a Muslim squadron. So in 47, that Muslim squadron went there, and we got a Jat squadron from the 6th Lancers, which is in Pakistan. What I'm just trying to say is the roots are the same. Professionalism, well, I'd like to say we are more professional, which we are. Uh, but they are also a formidable army, and they are getting, of course, the Americans have been loading them up with equipment to fight terrorism, but which is actually meant totally directed towards the Indian Army or Indian Armed Forces. So I would like to say that yes, they are a formidable army, and now they are getting a little more formidable because of the nuclear factor. As far as the nukes are concerned, most of you perhaps would know or not know that they have got more nukes in the basement vis-a-vis us. And that is also a matter of concern. However, if you please take the history since 1947 and 48, the Indian Armed Forces have always given them a bloody nose.
Well, I was, well, if this is the positive which we see, I think we are going to have a lot more fun when it goes to the negative part. Okay, Ritu, can you come in on Bangladesh, I mean, the subcontinent in general, but...
Shall I use yours? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, as I'm neither an ambassador nor a general, I have a slightly different take on partition, and I suppose I should come out with it up front. I have to say that I am a partition family. I mean, I have a first-hand experience of it, not myself, but certainly through parents and grandparents. And there was never a time that I was growing up that our conversations were not predicated by before partition and followed by after partition. It was a watershed for not just for my family, but of course for the millions who were affected. And I'm glad that Raghavan made that point about divided families, because it's the divided families that are living the partition, which is quite different from what our armed forces do and from what our governments do. It was only when I started researching partition 20 years ago and decided that I would do it from a three-country perspective that there was no way that we could understand this event if we were only ever navel-gazing as Indians, and tried to do that research in Pakistan, in India, and in Bangladesh with Bangladeshi and Pakistani researchers, that I understood something very fundamental about this event, which is that it is principally an Indian preoccupation. Nobody in Pakistan could care less about it. They were not interested. Every time we tried to get a research interest in the issue, they said it doesn't matter, it's the creation of a country. Partition in Pakistan has been completely displaced by the creation of a new country. It didn't matter. They were not interested. Where is the archive? Very difficult to find. Okay, so then we go to Bangladesh. Now, it struck us then, this was in the mid-80s, I'm talking about 1987, 1988, about 15 years after the creation of Bangladesh. We wondered why the creation of Bangladesh was never called the partition of Pakistan. After all, that country was dismembered, just as we say India was dismembered in 1947. So why was the creation of Bangladesh never called the partition of Pakistan? In Bangladesh, there was a total erasure of the East Pakistan years. That is, between 1947 and 1971, there was simply no desire to look at that period of history. Everything began in 1971. Now, what does one do when you are looking at an event, at a hugely significant event, like the 1947 partition of India? What do you do when the two consequent countries, other than India, are simply not interested? everyone wonders why there is no historiography of partition in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. There will not be. The historiography in Bangladesh is the Liberation War of 1971, in which, by the way, India was rather instrumental. And in Pakistan, the historiography is of the creation of the country. So we are left with the unfinished business in all three countries. In other words, my point is this, that we cannot understand 1947 or even what we are today if we continue as Indians to look at partition as primarily an Indian event. Certainly, the other two countries are not looking at it that way. And since I'm in Bangalore, perhaps I can also say it is principally a North Indian event. I have yet to see any very substantial interest in this that is not in the North. Again, in the North, Punjab. I mean, the partition, Raghavan mentioned the partition of Bengal. Well, Bengal was partitioned in 1905 as well, and then again in 1911. We know nothing about those partitions, not 1905, not 1911, and very, very little about 1947. Bengal is the erasure within India of partition. I have a great deal more to say about it, but I'll wait when we do the... Of course, now, as I said, I'm very happy that the question of river waters and so on has come up, because these are abiding concerns. But I will say, as somebody who has been working on this for the last 30 years, track 2 diplomacy would never have come about between India and Pakistan if it had not been for the sustained efforts of civil society to bridge these two countries. And I will name only 3. The Coalition for Nuclear Disarmament, the Physicists for Disarmament, the Women's Movement, the Environment Movement, and the Peace Movement. In addition to which, there has been a very strong and powerful labor movement that has connected both countries. Now, as of today, the more recent cultural exchanges have also been very, very positive developments between India and Pakistan. I'm focusing only on India-Pakistan now, not Bangladesh. Our relationship with Bangladesh is a very different thing from our relationship with Pakistan. But the positive things always are below the radar. They have never, ever achieved the kind of visibility that I think they deserve. And as I said, and I repeatedly say, I am have been part for years of the Pakistan-India peace movement, the Pakistan-India democracy movement. We have had any number of meetings, exchanges, conferences, books, pamphlets, you name it. Does anybody know? No. We only know surgical strikes and Kargil. Now, this to me is a great loss. It's a great loss for both countries. But track 2 could never have happened if this groundwork hadn't been laid. And thankfully, it continues.
Thank you. As the sole representative of Her Majesty the Queen, who is responsible for dividing our great land,
I see what you've done here.
what do you have to say?
How can I begin? I'm not a soldier, not a diplomat, not a historiographer, don't run a think tank. What do I do? Why am I on the stage? I travel a lot with absolute freedom, which is like one quality I can bring to this. I travel on both sides of the line of control. I've been in Muzaffarabad and I've been in Srinagar. I've been in the Punjab. I've been in Bahawalpur. I've been in Lahore, and I've traveled in every city that I can physically get to in the time that I've been traveling. And so I have impressions from both sides of the line of control that are very different to people who are gathered here. I'm also not tethered by diplomacy, so I can step out and meet the right people and the wrong people, and hopefully all of that goes well for me on my travels. But one thing that struck me coming out of this conversation, a base note in here, is the struggle for democracy. And it's a struggle on both sides of the border. The struggle to enable people to make choices and to have those choices manifest in Parliament. It's an important subject to raise post-47, both in terms of where Bangladesh is right now and where Pakistan is right now, and where India is right now, facing the kind of populist government that India has as part of a global rise of populism. In terms of Pakistan, this meeting has come at a really important time because we've seen the Nawaz Sharif government felled in the Supreme Court in a really intricate series of chess moves that have taken place. And you have to study these matters extremely carefully to begin to get a whiff of what might be going on right now in terms of democracy and its health in Pakistan. In one sense, it's bad news for India because Pakistan democracy has been severely weakened by the failure of prime ministers to see through their terms and for a transition of power to cleanly happen from whoever it would be, Nawaz Sharif to Imran Khan, whoever it would be, to the PPP. But on the other hand, other things have surprisingly sprung up with the ousting of Nawaz Sharif, including his extraordinary wriggling to gain back in power, which could only happen in the kind of democracy that's flourishing recently, post-88 in Pakistan. The fact that his wife managed in a by-election to grab a seat was a remarkable maneuver. And then the fact that he was made president by a party that didn't want to get rid of him, whether that be dynastic or not, was a sign to the establishment, the deep state, that the civilian parties would stand up. And the role of Imran Khan is also fascinating. He's very much been, without him knowing it, a tool of the ISI ever since he came into politics. And I can tell you a really interesting, colourful story about him, as I'm not a diplomat. I went to Banigala, and Banigala is an amazing confection, a kind of Disneyland in Pakistan. It's a beautiful enclave, not far from the Margala Hills, and it sits on a very fine reservoir, and the reservoir pumps water into Islamabad. And nearly all the houses that are there illegally because it's greenbelt and you can't build on it. And the biggest house of all, in the highest position, belongs to Imran Khan, the defender of democracy and freedom. And I sat in his house as he flushed his toilet, and the grey water flew into the reservoir feeding Islamabad. And I wondered if he realized the symbolism of that act. It's a parasitic society which is struggling to create space for the middle classes, to create space for civil society, to create space for the democratic project. And actually there are lessons in India too, facing popularism and a clamping down on democratic freedoms. And so perhaps what we should be looking at here is the way in which Pakistan democracy evolves. We need it to evolve in order for there to be a chance of peace. We need it to evolve in order to be able to reach different areas of the country and progress with development. And also for strategic factors, which is my last point. Very much in the background of all of this is China. And it's China that we should all be looking at in the region. China's relationship to Pakistan, as you know, goes back to the 60s, when Pakistan was one of the few countries that would stand by the rise of communism. And the Chinese permissive relationship with Pakistan rearmed it, retooled it, effectively facilitated nuclear Pakistan in many ways. And now opposite the Silk Road project, $35 billion worth of development, which will both be good in terms of power, health, and the implications that go with that, and bad in terms of the defense posturing that may come from that and the facilitation of weapons programs. And another factor that comes off this is Iran. Iran has also emerged as a superpower in the region and is being overlooked by all parties. The Iranian relationship with Pakistan and the lack of one from India to Iran is a crucial thing to be looking at in terms of the evolution of the power pack post-47.
Thanks, Adrian. Now, I just want to take it from democracy and come back to come back to a period which is after partition. Let's leave partition. Come to the 70s. In the 70s, you had Indira Gandhi as a powerful politician in India. You had Bhutto in Pakistan. What do you think were their political legacies as far as democracy is concerned?
Well, the political legacies are divided, both in India and in Pakistan, or both Mrs. Gandhi and Mrs.
And let's bring Mujib also inside with Bangladesh.
Well, certainly all three of them, and it makes a wonderful triangle to examine. But their political legacies are deeply divided. And these are contestations which continue in each of these three countries. I think the big point is that certainly in Pakistan, and even so in Bangladesh, India looms much larger in their consciousness than Bangladesh or Pakistan loom over here. So if you see how democracy in India and democratic institutions in India have become a kind of benchmark both in Bangladesh and Pakistan, is quite interesting. For instance, if you see the Supreme Court or you see the Election Commission, it was strides made by these institutions in India in the 90s, which really became a kind of standard for Pakistan and Bangladesh. So there is a certain impact which democracy in India has had. Of course, the process has had its own ups and downs, but nevertheless, democracy is a very powerful force. I would also say that we have to be cognizant of the fact that both Pakistan and Bangladesh are separate countries. We can't be too wedded to the notion that unless there is democracy in Pakistan, things are not going to change between India and Pakistan. It may be true in a long-term sense, but we live in the here and now. And if you look at the here and the now, it's quite interesting. Some of the major strides in bilateral relations, especially between India and Pakistan, have been made when there have been military dictators in Pakistan. You look at the Ayub Khan years, the Indus Waters Treaty is one example, but you also look at the Musharraf years. All the strides forward on opening up the LOC and on other areas were when there was a military dictator in charge of Pakistan. Bollywood was banned in Pakistan in 1965 after the war, and it remained banned till 2005 when Musharraf, as a military dictator, withdrew the ban. So I think the picture is a lot more complex, because if we get too wedded to the notion that till there is a receding of the army's position, nothing is going to change, we will overlook the tactical ups and downs which happen in the present itself.
Ritu, I'll come to you. Now, we talked about one set of leaders. Now Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India have all had female politicians, women leaders at the very helm of power. Now, would you say that this has made a difference to their own countries? I mean, in the sense that does having a woman prime minister make a difference to your own country? Forget about international relations.
No, I don't know why women are always asked this question. And I certainly don't know why I, as a feminist, have to speak for all women. Of course, they have made no difference. How can they make a difference when they are entrenched in a deeply patriarchal state and a deeply patriarchal society? Well, how the hell are they going to make a difference? But since I have the mic, I'm just going to respond very briefly to something that Raghavan said and a point that Adrian made about the deep state. See, look at our three countries. Every single country has a contested border. Every single country. This, for me, is the legacy of partition. Every single country. You look at our northeast, you look at Kashmir. You look at Balochistan, you look at Sindh. You look at the Chittagong Hill Tracts, and you look at what is happening in the north of Bangladesh, surrounded on all four sides by India. Imagine a country which is surrounded on all four sides by another country which doesn't look upon it too kindly. I mean, we're tolerant of it, but that's about it. So what does this mean in terms of, and I'm speaking now not as somebody in defense of either one of the countries or the other, but I'm speaking now as somebody who is concerned about what is happening in the region, this triangle that Raghavan spoke about. In my view, it tells us three things: that our borders are porous. Some borders are more porous than others. Some are fenced, some are not. India has the longest border with Nepal. It's an open border. Why? Nepal is not a problem for us. it also shows us, I think very critically, the fragility of the nation state. Pakistan is fragile as a state, India is less fragile but still fragile, and Bangladesh, of course, is vulnerable. It is fragile and vulnerable. And the third really important outcome of this, in my view, is that we have the abiding figure of the refugee. The refugee that first was born, if I might use the word, in 1947. That refugee is with us. We see its outcome now in India, in Assam, and in the Rohingya. And in now, so what are we talking about as a region? What is South Asia as a region? I'm frankly not that concerned about India and Pakistan as I am about what is happening within the region in all these aspects. And what is it that we are doing about it? If we continue to focus on India and Pakistan, really we are losing the plot.
Thank you. Since I've just been taken to task by Ritu here, and since many of you have clapped, I'll ask the same question to General Davar. Did having women prime ministers make a difference? You can also take your Bangladesh question.
Let me tell you, I'm an unabashed admirer of Indira Gandhi for the simple reason that she, under her indomitable political leadership, got India the greatest victory in all times. Now, one small point regarding Bangladesh you mentioned, and the Pakistanis always tell us that India is to blame as far as the partition of Pakistan is concerned. They forget something, and I think we also need to remember, we have to take a lesson why Pakistan was partitioned in 1972. What were the events which led to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto not agreeing to the election results which took place in 1971 or 1970-71, and they used to treat the Bengalis like, nothing on, they used to call them black bastards, you are half Indians, all of you are Hindus, this, that, and the other. So please never try and belittle anybody's culture, anybody's language, anybody's this thing. And I think, heard Ramchandra Guha also yesterday. Everybody who stays in India, he has to be respected. The Pakistanis didn't respect the Bengalis, and look what happened to their country. And ma'am, that is the reason Pakistan was partitioned. We, of course, had a major role to play, the Indian Armed Forces, and Mrs. Gandhi, because the Pakistanis gave us an opportunity, so we took it. We took a great strategic opportunity, and we changed the map of South Asia. Now, coming to your point about South Asia, what are we doing? I totally agree with you that India, which started, was instrumental in fostering and for making these SAARC nations for South Asia. Unfortunately, today, India-Pakistan hostility has ensured that SAARC, or the South Asian region, which we call, has not really, we've not really had something like the European Union, though of course the European Union is also now going to split. Fortunately or unfortunately for them, I do not know. So we also must take lessons from the Bangladesh thing, and also we must also ensure India is the largest country, maximum resources. If I can call ourselves, we are the elder sibling in South Asia, so we must work towards harmonizing economic resurgence and harmony and everything within South Asia. I just like to make a mention about, Nitin, you had mentioned about, when you mentioned about these three leaders. Now let me tell you, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto has done a great service to his country by ensuring that they are also a nuclear power. And nuclear, with Pakistanis having a nuclear capability, I'm afraid we may not like it. But as a military man, I can tell you, strategic deterrence in this subcontinent has been achieved by Pakistan also having nukes. Let there be no doubt on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'd like to take on the female leader question. Let's just come back to that now. I think of right now Aung San Suu Kyi. I think of Margaret Thatcher, who I grew up with, and I think of Theresa May, weak, ineffective. I think gender had nothing to do with the issues. They were bad leaders, and they've proven to be bad leaders who've not necessarily loved democracy in their own ways. And I'd like to come back to that issue of democracy. I worry slightly, Ambassador, by the equation that's drawn, and it's drawn by Americans. So particularly, it's become their Bible, that the cohesive strength in Pakistan lies in its integral military. That's something that the military project as true because they've consumed all the assets of the country. They own more land, they own more industry and more wealth. But whether it's true that they actually are the cohesive, professionalized force, or whether or not they're making democracy fragile at the same instance, is what I wonder. I mean, since I've observed it since '88, they've used every measure they can to enfeeble and make corrupt and weaken the democratic project. And I think that we must support the democratic project. Otherwise, there'll never be a way to shrink the military. And, as everyone always says with Pakistan, there was a military before there was a country. And the relationship in India is so much different, protected by constitution. And the military is revered in a different way, respected in a different way, whereas it's feared in Pakistan. ISI is not a word that people mutter at dinner with you. They come up with any number of pseudonyms for the organization because they live in fear of it in the way that people did in the Soviet bloc. So fostering democracy, creating oversight, and a sense of social cohesion matters for India and matters for Pakistan.
Well, to my mind, we have to be very clear. Pakistan is 200 million people. As General Davar said, it has nuclear weapons. What external powers, whether the United States or India or China, can do to change internal conditions in Pakistan is very limited. I think we have to rid ourselves of this notion that Indians or the United States or anyone else can foster democracy in Pakistan. That is something which the Pakistani people themselves have to sort out. You don't have a choice in the matter. You have to deal as an immediate neighbor. You're not far away, 2 continents away. You have to deal with very pressing issues today. You have no choice about who you're going to deal with. You have to deal with who's in charge or who appears to be in charge or who the majority of people in Pakistan believe is in charge. It's a difficult choice. But I think we really don't have an option in the matter. Nothing you can do or say will make a difference in terms of the civil-military equation in Pakistan in any substantive sense. We may like to analyze it till kingdom come, but the fact remains that internal dynamic is very much of an internal dynamic for Pakistanis to sort out.
Thank you. I think as a good panel, I like to think of a good panel as one where the panelists start off with opening several interesting and controversial lines of discussion, and then we'll leave it half open, and then we'll go up to the audience. So with that, I think I'll just ask you to raise your questions. Please keep your questions brief, very, very brief, and directed towards one person so that it's easier for them to know. So I'll just have to follow where the mics go. Okay. Please, would you just stand up? Yeah, and I request the organizers to have a set of mics at the back so that people at the back can also be given the mics.
All right, ma'am. So my question is for you. So you mentioned that the women leaders in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh have not been able to make an impact due to due to patriarchy. So my question to you is that, I mean, in Bangladesh we have a female prime minister. In India, we had Indira Gandhi, and yesterday there was Sagarika Ghosh, who basically named her, the most powerful PM that India has ever had. So, and in Pakistan, unfortunately, I think what you said holds true very much. So, how do you even, how can you say something like this, that the leaders have not had any impact due to patriarchy, when someone like Indira Gandhi, pretty much went ahead and destroyed all or any kind of male superiority that was put in front of her. So your thoughts, please.
Shall I answer now? You see, in my view, You have an impact if that impact remains, if it continues, if it is sustained. Indira Gandhi might, as Sagarika said, I don't agree with her, but since that's her view, if she says that she was the most powerful person, she didn't say powerful woman, she said she was the most powerful leader that India has had, I'd like to see how that has made a difference to India. It made a very big difference to Indira. It made a very big difference to the Congress. But did it make a difference to India? Is what concerns me. I thought I heard you say Bangladesh. I would be the last person to say that Indira Gandhi was the creator of Bangladesh. And I will agree with the general when he says that these struggles, just like the struggle for democracy in Pakistan, these struggles are rooted in the ground. They are not created by any leader, either their own or in another country. Of course, India facilitated the Mukti Bahini. Everybody knows that. And look what India tried to do in Sri Lanka and got its nose bloodied. What was the IPKF all about and who bloodied its nose? So that was not Indira Gandhi, it was her son. Okay, so I'm saying these are not leaders who leave an impact. They are leaders who come and go. I'd like to see Theresa May's impact. I'd like to see Khalida Zia's impact, Sheikh Hasina's impact, Benazir Bhutto's impact. What is it? But I will say for Benazir that she started the movement for democracy, which we have all forgotten about. The movement for democracy was Benazir Bhutto's in opposition to her father. Let's remember that.
But aren't you taking agency away from the leaders? I mean, I'm
No,
not
this
talking
is-
about women in general. There's agency at the highest levels of the state.
Of course they have agency. His question wasn't that. His question was, why are you saying they had no impact? Which is a very different thing. And agency is of all kinds. Agency can be positive and agency can be in pursuit of power for its own sake.
I'm Brigadier Sandhu. First part I want to ask about the partition. Ma'am has raised a question. When the partition process started going on after the Calcutta the session of the Congress 1942, the Mr. Jinnah wanted Islamic State. There's no doubt about it. We know its history well. He wanted to act on the religion-based state. It was offered to him. The maximum population of Muslims were in UP and Bihar. That was called Central Province. He refused it. Simple reason. He said one side Marathwada.
So would you ask a question, please?
No, I'm just telling you, madam. So it was a Pakistani, they wanted the Pakistani state somewhere next to Muslim state, where the Muslim country is, number one. Number two, about the Mukti Bani, I operated there in 71 war, I've taken part. Mukti Bani just recreated. Why? The influx of the refugees were lakhs and lakhs. Even then that border, we deployed.
Could you ask the question? I mean,
No,
is it about refugees?
now we blame Mrs. Indira Gandhi, or the world blames Indira Gandhi for the creation of Pakistan, sorry, Bangladesh. It's not that. They started and we followed it. We got a chance. We were a neighboring country and we fought it. Now, lastly, General Davar, I served with him, under him rather, 2 times. And the soldiering, yes, they are the best army in the world, and we lead officers from the front. You see now J&K, you see in 71, you see in Kargil. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, can I ask this gentleman
I'll
with the
just
blue
ask the
shirt
question.
over here? Oh, you have the mic. Okay.
Yeah, I have the mic. Okay. My question is to Adrian. How do you see China and America now, taking, playing this game? The way it is panning out. China is now running away with the show, and Donald Trump is saying that, we should do this and we should do that. How does, this all pan out?
Shall I just do that quick? China quickly, like in one sentence. I do think that the Trump administration, through its projection of madness, has actually a specific goal re China. I think it's trying to destabilize China, I think incorrectly, using a kind of 19th century strategic game. It's doing that by creating instability in North Korea, even though there were back channels there. And Bannon's idea was the more instability they could create in North Korea, the more they heated up the border with China and made China on the defense worried about the refugee and nuclear fallout issue. And there is a belief in Washington that they need to restate US hegemony in terms of trade and power and do that by undermining China. So China will be key, absolutely key, and so will Iran.
My question is to Mr. Adrian. If he would be so kind as to shower some light on the future of soft power projection of the countries of the subcontinent, given its current state, and also the nexus of US, Russia, and Israel in the subcontinent.
Way complicated. Okay. So maybe I'll just talk about, I think it's a good thing about soft power. Let's just bring this out. And I want to draw all the panelists on this.
Also, a slight question.
That's fine. I think you have a book there which looks like you're preparing for some exam.
These are my
and
notes.
you're getting the answers
These
out of
are my
us.
notes.
It's quite scary. So we'll just talk about soft power and let each of the panelists talk about the soft power of the three states of the
Also,
subcontinent.
the future of track to diplomacy, if you'd be so
right.
kind.
And moon mission and so.
In the pursuit of your national interests, strategic interests, soft power plays a very vital role. And you please see, India has always done it in the past. We're doing it in the neighborhood. At times, I think we do announce a fair amount. We do not also talk about it. Now, you please take Afghanistan, in the periphery, and I think all the $2 billion plus, the making of the dam there and things like that, sending, establishing their hospitals, infrastructure, power transmission lines, this, that, and the other. And above all, Bollywood, let me tell you, Bollywood is a great projection of India's soft power. And so I think we are doing it, and we should do a little, much more than we are doing now, keeping within our resources. And I think the government of India knows about this, and they're taking all steps.
Well, Indian soft power in Pakistan is tremendous. There's a certain ingress or certain receptivity to Pakistan, Pakistani culture in India too, but much more limited of the kind of Indian soft or cultural space which India has in Pakistan. But I think when we are talking about soft power, you must see it from a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi point of view. Because they don't just see India as soft power or Bollywood. They see India as very hard power. Your population is 6 times that of Pakistan. Your GDP is 8 times that of Pakistan. You have a defense expenditure which is 10 times that of Pakistan. For Bangladesh, as Ritu said, you surround Bangladesh from 3 directions. They don't see India as a soft power projector. They see you as a hard power projector. So when we get triumphalist about our soft power, and Indian soft power is tremendous. Bollywood is the most prominent example of that. But when we get triumphalist about our soft power, it's good to be cautious about that.
I just want to talk about soft power as well, because I've figured this out. If you're Pakistani or Bangladeshi, I think one of the things happens is your own soft power is subsumed under Indian soft power. If you're in the United States, you might be a Bangladeshi, but you're running a North Indian restaurant. If you're Pakistani, you're running a North Indian restaurant. You're singing songs, but it's Indian music, right? So there is very little Pakistani or Bangladeshi about. I mean, this is post 47. The singers could be born in the 70s or the 80s. The cooks could be born in the 80s and the 90s. But you're still selling Indian food and Indian music. So it's sort of. I find that it sort of troubles them when we talk about soft power, because it seems that it's a subsidiary or a subset of Indian soft power.
But there is a projection of India which is taking place actively now. If we look at Afghanistan and other contested places, India's strategic game in Afghanistan has been extraordinary. And if you look at the way that they've set up the consular outlying consular areas, whether it's in Host or Jalalabad, the projection of Indian interests and the allying of those interests with the government in Kabul has been fantastically, capably achieved. And a lot of money has been spent on doing that. I think Afghanistan is one example of strategic depth, inheriting an idea from Pakistan and taking it off the Pakistanis. There are other examples as well, but I think that one comes to mind.
Hi.
You know, one of the
Question.
things that
Hello. Short question.
I just want to say, sorry, I just wanted to endorse what Raghavan said about Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka and Nepal, by the way, seeing India as a hegemonic power, not only a hard power, but someone out to swallow all of them. You know, somebody who works with, as I said earlier, with a lot of civil society groups, as they are called now, but also marginal groups, we are constantly asked, as Indians, what have you to say about the sharing of the waters? As Indians, what have you to say about the Nepali and Bhutanese refugees? As Indians, what have you to say about Raw's interference in Balochistan? And so on and so forth. The point is that they really feel that they are being held hostage on several issues, especially Bangladesh. I just want to make this point again and again. They feel totally vulnerable, not only because they are surrounded, but because actually, for them, the sharing of waters is a very critical issue. It is a very critical issue. And despite Mamta Banerjee, India is not moving on that.
Can I have somebody at the back, as far back as you can go? And there was also a lady who had raised her hand. So, the lady behind you. Yeah. You just give it to her. Yeah. So this is equity. You know, you've got to be sensitive to equity. The people at the back and people who don't want to speak and such things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This is for Ms. Menon. Ma'am, you spoke about the narrative of partition being substituted by the creation of another country in Pakistan. Now, that narrative could have been changed when Bangladesh was created. My question is, now Pakistan has been an acronym for Punjab, Afghanistan, Kashmir, and Baloch. Because Bangladesh never figured in their imagination, do you think that narrative never changed? And the second question that I'd like to ask is, has this been more positive to have not all the countries that were born of this continue to talk about partition but talk about it differently?
You see, I think that what came as a very big shock with the creation of Bangladesh for Pakistan, which, by the way, to date has not apologized for all the atrocities and the killings that took place pre-71. I think the biggest shock was that that Islam and being Muslim was not the significant factor. The thing that shocked them most was that language became such an important criterion for nationhood, for identification. Now, obviously, the narrative had to change. Not officially, never officially. How can Pakistan say it is not a Pakistan, that it is not a nation for Muslims? It cannot say that officially, but unofficially, obviously, it was no longer Pakistan for the Bengalis. So the narrative has changed unofficially, not officially. Have they come to terms with partition? They don't need to. We have to come to terms with it. As Raghavan has said again and again, no point saying, you know, India is dismembered, this is what the Brits did, this is what Jinnah did, this is what the Muslims did. I disagree totally with that honorable gentleman who said it was created by the UP and the Bihari. Not at all. Why did they stay back? Why was the whole of UP refugees sent to Sindh? Why? To create a constituency for Liaquat Ali Khan. The normal course would have been for the UP refugees to go to Punjab. They did not go to Punjab. They went to Sindh. They were sent to Sindh. We have to understand these things. I mean, it's no use trading in platitudes, honestly.
Okay, there's a gentleman there. We've got to wind up. So the last two, we'll take
Short
one and
question.
serve over here.
Short question. It's about the business of the conflict itself. You know, just maybe Nitin
Question
and
for
Adrian. The business part of the conflict. There's a lot of money spent on addressing this conflict over the years. I'm sure it has grown. It has even furthered careers in bureaucracy, the forces, even in journalism. How, with given such vested interests, how can you really de-escalate this whole thing? I mean, it's a sizable amount of money being spent out.
See, I think I just want to answer that because it sort of comes out of the conversation. See, I don't think that the political economy is driving the conflict. There is a conflict which has deep structural reasons, and there are a lot of actors who benefit from that conflict and the deep structural reasons that why there is a India-Pakistan or India-Bangladesh, which we discussed. So I think it's a sort of misleading to think that there are a bunch of people who benefit from this conflict, and because of them, the conflict exists, right? So.
I mean, do you see or do you envisage any solution to the present situation? Hmm?
Well, so the question was, do we think there's a solution to the present situation? Is this one-word answers each or a sentence?
Yeah, we've got about 3 or 4
Okay, briefly, no. I think these are bad times. I feel there is a global movement that's going against us as well. In terms of the advent of local fears and populism, which has infected India, infected Britain, affected Europe and other countries. It's making a lot of difficulties in terms of cross-border peace as well. Pakistan's in a bad place in terms of where its democratic institutions are, and the military is increasingly bellicose over there, and they have become increasingly bellicose, backed by China, and I worry about that. I worry about that stance. I don't see a softening at all. And I really would look for one. I travel widely there and would look for one. And I feel that with China behind them and the advent of other possibilities, including a contested relationship with the Taliban, which is now being shared with Iran, there may be even more problems to come.
See, I find solutions are very elusive, not just in this, in these inter-country, subcontinental ways, but even internally, I would say, my God, we have 100 problems to which we have no solution. But what I would put my energy in is to make things better. How do we make them better? Now, I just wanted to say one thing in the context of soft power, and I'll take only half a minute, which is, of course, the minute we open up trade relations between India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, by the way, you will find that there is an enormous shift. It will be a tectonic shift, much more significant than Bollywood and cricket and every other single item, offering that we can make. You open up trade between the 3 countries, you will see the difference. You open up the free flow of information between the 3 countries, you will see the difference. As of now, our trade protocols simply do not allow this. I mean, I'm a publisher. I deal in books. I'm published all the time in Pakistan. I publish Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Sri Lankans all the time. Do you know, in order to sell my books in Pakistan, I have to go via Singapore? Because I cannot deal directly with them. I cannot deal directly with Bangladesh. I can hardly deal directly with Sri Lanka. This is an impossible situation. Now, why don't we do it? We are very willing to do it. Raghavan will tell you how many times we have tried to get that protocol going. Pakistan doesn't want it because they're going to be engulfed by Indian goods. Bangladesh doesn't want it for similar reasons. What do we do in that situation? I mean, these are, in my view, this is the kind of soft power that we should be talking about, in addition to, of course, Afghanistan and, building the cultural center in Jaffna and so on, all of which we do. Does it make a difference on the ground?
Well, very briefly, I don't want to minimize what Adrian said, and each of these are very important and weighty factors. But I've lived 7 years in Pakistan, and they've been very bad times, much like they are now. But nevertheless, I'm a great optimist. And my optimism derives not from government policy, but seeing internally what is happening in India, in Pakistan, and also to some extent in Bangladesh, which is that change is taking place in a way which is disassociated from government policy. And the big reason for that change is technology. Now, we can't sell Indian books in Pakistan, but it's getting less and less important because everyone is downloading them on Kindle. You can ban newspapers or you can ban films, but the internet is a great universe and a great liberating influence. And technology, in very much the same way as it is transforming India beyond all recognition, is also going to transform its relations with each of its neighbors, but it will take time.
How do you break the logjam and what is the way forward? I think is the most difficult question. And I think I'm the last speaker on this. So it makes my task difficult. Very briefly, you know, the Musharraf Manmohan Singh formula, I think, is the only answer. But you have to take the Pakistan military on board. But now you'll say, how will the Pakistan military get on the board? Because as one of their famous authors, Aisha Siddiqa, has herself said, that they are suffering from this culture of entitlement, which you all know how, I think Adrian mentioned this, the military business, mil bus, what they call. They are into everything, you know, it's the Pakistan military post-retirement is a 20 billion industry. So you have, the government of India will have to open up an avenue to the Pakistan military. You have to get them on board. The Musharraf Manmohan Singh formula, which everybody knows about, though it doesn't exist on paper or formally, is the answer. We'll have to freeze territorial claims on each other. We have to encourage trade. And let me tell you, the unofficial trade is into billions of dollars via Singapore or via Dubai and all, as you most of you would know. So I would say that as the elder sibling, India will have to take some steps for accommodating them. But whether it will be a permanent accommodation with them or not, I at the moment am not at all optimistic.